first thing I noticed was the echo. My own footstep in my own front hallway bouncing back at me off bare walls, off empty floors, off the particular hollow silence of a room that has been stripped of everything that made it a room and is now just a box. I stood in the doorway with my work bag still on my shoulder and my key still in my hand, and I looked at the space where my living room used to be, and I thought for exactly one surreal second that I had walked into the wrong house. I hadn't. This was my house. My mortgage, my name, the locks I had changed twice, and the alarm code only I knew. And it was empty in the way that only one type of empty is. Not broken into empty, not robbed in a hurry empty. Deliberate empty. Curated empty. The television gone, its cord draped on the carpet like something that had been unplugged with patience. The furniture gone, the bookshelves gone, the photographs, 8 years of photographs from my walls, gone. The kitchen still had its appliances because those were bolted in, but the counters were bare, the cabinets left open as if to show me they'd checked inside. And on the counter, one piece of paper, a printed email confirmation, 2 first-class tickets, Honolulu, departure time, 2:40 p.m. I already had the email on my phone. My mother had sent it from the Uber on the way to the airport. I had read it twice on the drive home, which is why, standing in the echo of my own gutted house, I already knew what it said. No more gray winters. You'll learn what happens when you disrespect your mother. Enjoy the quiet, Ava. She had signed it with a sun emoji. I looked at the bare carpet where my couch used to be. I looked at the walls where the frames used to hang. I looked at the empty space on my bedroom dresser where my grandmother's jewelry box had lived for 11 years, since the week after the funeral, when my aunt pressed it into my hands and said, "She wanted you to have this." Gone. I set my bag down. I set my keys down. And then I did something my mother had never, in 31 years of knowing me, correctly predicted. I smiled, because 3 months ago I had started moving very quietly, and Karen Harper had absolutely no idea. I need to explain who my mother is before I explain what she did, because she is not a cartoon villain. That would almost be easier. She is something more complicated and more exhausting. A woman of considerable charm and total conviction who has, for her entire adult life, operated on the belief that love is a resource to be managed, and family is a leverage point. She is beautiful in that particular maintenance-intensive way, always put together, always performing a version of herself, the wronged woman, the self-sacrificing mother, the one who gave up everything, that she has refined over decades into something very nearly convincing. I spent most of my 20s trying to earn her approval. This is embarrassing to admit, but it is true. And I think it matters for what comes later, because it explains why I had been slow to see the pattern clearly. My name is Ava Harper. I'm 31 years old, and I'm a senior data engineer at a cloud infrastructure company in Seattle. I had been there 7 years when all of this happened, through 2 promotions and a company acquisition and a stock vesting schedule that over the course of a decade had quietly accumulated into something substantial. I am not flashy about money. I drive a 2019 Honda CR-V. I own a modest 3-bedroom in a neighborhood my mother once described as perfectly fine, and I do not talk about my finances with people I don't trust completely. My mother had lived with me briefly, 8 months, 3 years earlier, after her second divorce. I had added her to a joint checking account during that period for the practical reason that she needed to buy groceries and pay for prescriptions, and I wasn't always home to give her cash. When she moved out to an apartment I helped her find and partly helped her furnish, I had meant to close the joint account. I kept meaning to. It was on the list. I understand now that leaving it open was not entirely an accident. Some part of me kept it as a kind of tether, a way of still being useful to her, which is what I had always tried to be. My sister Megan is 27, 4 years younger than me, and exists in permanent orbit around my mother. She is not malicious on her own. I have thought about this a lot, and I believe it is true. She is the product of a lifetime of being managed by Karen, trained to follow, trained to see loyalty as compliance, and love as alignment. Where my mother is controlled and strategic, Megan is impulsive. Where my mother plans, Megan panics. They are a complicated machine, the two of them, and I had watched them operate my entire life, and the mistake I had made, the only real mistake, was believing I was outside the machine's range. I was not. The thing that changed everything happened 3 months before the empty house, and it started small. In August, I came home from a work trip to find that my mother had been by while I was gone. I hadn't asked her to come. She had a key. I had given it to her during the divorce months, another tether I'd never formally reclaimed. She'd left a note on the counter saying she'd checked in on the place, and she'd taken a casserole dish because she needed one and she knew I had extras. The casserole dish was a thing I had bought at a kitchen sale and did not care about. What I noticed, standing in my kitchen reading the note, was a feeling I couldn't immediately name. Not anger, exactly. More like the particular unease of realizing someone has been in your space without your knowledge and made decisions about what was theirs to take. The casserole dish was replaceable. The comfort with which she'd walked into my home and removed something because she'd decided it was available. That was the thing. I told myself I was being oversensitive. I wasn't. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my bank. A flag on the joint account. A transfer attempt that had been blocked by their new AI monitoring system because it exceeded the account's usual transaction pattern. The attempted transfer was for $8,000. Destination, an account I didn't recognize. When I called to review it, the bank representative, a patient, careful man named Steven in the fraud department, walked me through it. The transfer had been initiated via online banking from a device associated with a login I didn't recognize. recognize. The login had used my mother's device credentials, which were authorized for the account because she was a joint holder. Stephen said carefully, "Do you want to flag this as unauthorized, Ms. Harper?" I sat with the phone against my ear for a long moment. "Not yet," I said. "Just monitor it for me." Then I went home and I opened a new brokerage account at an institution my mother had never heard me mention, requiring a physical hardware security key for any withdrawal authorizations, a key that lived on my keychain alongside my car key and went everywhere I went. Over the following 3 weeks, I moved quietly. Paycheck direct deposits rerouted, investment accounts transferred. The majority of my liquid assets, $520,000, accumulated over 10 years of good salaries and careful choices, migrated to the new institution, the one with the physical key. The process took 11 days, and I did not mention it to anyone. The old joint account I left open. Balance, $2,300. I did not close it. I did not change the passwords. I did not alert my mother that anything had changed. I left it exactly as it was, fat and inviting and completely, deliberately, insignificant. I want to be clear. I did not know precisely what was coming. I did not have a specific prediction. I just knew, in the way you know things about people you have watched your entire life, that my mother was planning something and that the bait needed to look real. It did. The email arrived at 3:07 p.m. on a Thursday while I was in a meeting. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I excused myself at 3:22 p.m., stepped into the hallway, and read it. I read it twice. Then I went back into the meeting. I want to say something about that, because I've been asked about it. Why didn't I leave immediately? Why didn't I call the police from the parking lot or race home or do any of the things that panic demands? Because I knew what I'd find. I had 4 security cameras on my property, a wise system I'd installed 2 years earlier after a neighbor's car was broken into, which my mother knew about only abstractly because I'd mentioned it once in passing, and she had the particular blind spot of someone who has never truly believed consequences apply to her. The cameras had been running. Whatever had happened at my house that afternoon was already documented. Panicking wouldn't change that. I finished the meeting. I drove home at 5:15 p.m. in the gray October rain, and I walked into the Echo. My first call, standing in the bare living room with my coat still on, was to my attorney. Danielle Marsh has been practicing criminal and civil litigation in King County for 16 years. She is 44 years old, precise, and almost entirely unflappable, which I have always found reassuring. I had retained her 2 years earlier for a separate matter involving a former landlord and a security deposit dispute, and I had kept her contact because some instinct told me she was the kind of attorney worth keeping. She answered on the 3rd ring. "They took everything," I said. "My mother and sister. I came home to an empty house. I have it on camera." A pause. "Tell me what you see." I described the rooms, the missing furniture, the television, the jewelry box. "The jewelry box," Danielle repeated. "Sentimental or monetary value?" "Both. My grandmother's ring is in there, appraised at $14,000, and I have the appraisal document." "Okay." The sound of typing. "Send me the camera footage the moment you pull it. Don't touch anything in the house yet. Take photos first, every room, and timestamp them. Then I want you to call the fraud department at your bank." Already on my list. My second call was to the fraud department. I asked for Stephen specifically, because Stephen already knew the account history. He pulled up the records while I was on the phone. 2 login attempts in the previous 48 hours from an unrecognized device. 1 successful login. 1 transfer attempt, the full balance, $2,300, to the same unrecognized destination account as August. "The transfer was blocked," Stephen said. "The account flagged it based on the prior incident. It's already restricted." "Perfect," I said. "I need a full report of the access attempts and the blocked transfer, with timestamps, for my attorney. I'll have that for you within the hour." My third call was to the non-emergency police line. I was calm and I was factual. I had come home to find my residence cleared of personal property without my authorization. I had written evidence in the form of an email from one of the individuals involved, and I had security camera footage of the entry and removal. The responding officer, a young man named Officer Keating, who seemed slightly uncertain about what he was dealing with, took my statement and called for a detective. Detective Sandra Okafor arrived at 7:45 p.m. She was 39, 12 years in the department, currently assigned to property crimes. She came in, looked at the empty rooms, looked at me, still in my coat, photographing the bare walls methodically, and said, "Walk me through it." I walked her through it. I showed her the camera footage on my laptop, the exterior Wise camera that had captured my mother's red Kia, pulling up at 12:41 p.m., the garage remote opening the side door I had forgotten to deprogram, the 2 women entering and moving through the house for 1 hour and 53 minutes with the systematic confidence of people who believed they were doing something entirely reasonable. At one point in the footage, my mother stood in the center of my stripped living room and filmed it on her phone, slowly, moving in a deliberate arc, documenting the emptiness like a photographer at an installation. Detective Okafor watched that clip twice. Then she looked at me. She filmed it. Yes. She filmed herself committing burglary. Yes. Okafor wrote something in her notebook. "Where are they now?" I showed her the email, the sun emoji. She wrote something else. I pulled the camera footage that night. Every clip time-stamped, backed up to my personal cloud storage, and a separate external drive that I kept in my car. I cataloged every missing item. The 65-inch Samsung television, serial number, receipt from Best Buy dated 14 months prior. The furniture, IKEA sectional, replacement value $612. Solid oak dining table, handmade, $4,200, grandmother's jewelry box and contents, appraised value, including the ring, at $18,500. I had receipts for approximately 80% of the items because I am the kind of person who keeps receipts, which is the kind of thing that becomes very relevant when you're on the phone with an insurance adjuster. By 11:30 p.m., I had a folder of documentation that Danielle later described as the most organized evidence package I've ever received from a client. I filed the insurance claim the following morning. Marcus Riley, my claims adjuster at Northwestern Mutual, was methodical and thorough, and mildly stunned by the nature of the incident. "Your family members," he said carefully, "and they emailed you from the airport." I forwarded the email to my attorney, I said. "She'll be in contact." I sent Danielle the footage, the bank records, the insurance documentation, the itemized list, and the email from the airport. I added no commentary. I let the documents speak. She responded within 20 minutes. "This email is functionally a confession. Do not contact them. Do not warn them. Let them keep sending things." So I waited. The second email arrived 2 days later at 11:14 a.m. A photo. My mother and Megan at the Honolulu airport, both in sunglasses, the tropical light saturating everything golden. Megan's carry-on between her knees, my mother's arm around her shoulder. Both of them smiling the wide, released smile of people who have escaped something they found confining. "Wish you were here." "Actually, no, we don't." I forwarded it to Danielle without a word. Her response: Exhibit B. "Thank you, Karen. I want to tell you I spent those days in some kind of productive calm. Partly I did. I worked, I ate, I slept on an air mattress in the bedroom. Danielle had advised me not to replace the furniture yet to preserve the documentation of loss. I cooked in a kitchen with no table and ate standing at the counter. I called my friend Priya every evening, not to process, just to talk about normal things, because sometimes normal things are the only anchor. But there were moments, at night mostly, in the particular dark of a house, stripped of the objects that make a space familiar, when I would feel the specific grief of missing my grandmother's ring. Not the monetary value, the weight of it. The fact that I had looked at it for 11 years on the corner of my dresser and thought of Frances Harper, who had been dead for a decade, and who had been, in every way that mattered, the person in my family who had told me I was worth something. Gone. I didn't let myself stay in that feeling for long. There would be time later. Right now, the feeling was information, not instruction. 7 days after the empty house, my phone rang from an unknown number at 6:52 p.m. I almost didn't answer. Then I did, and I said nothing. I just put the phone to my ear and let the other person speak first. "Ava," my mother's voice. And the thing that struck me immediately, the thing I had never heard in 31 years of listening to Karen Harper, was the shakiness. Not the practiced quaver she deployed when she wanted sympathy. Something genuinely unsteady. The voice of someone standing in terrain they had not prepared for. "We need help right now." Background noise. A lobby, I thought. Other voices. Megan saying something I couldn't make out. "The cards are declined. All of them. The hotel is threatening to call the police. They're saying there's a fraud flag on the accounts." "Ava, what did you do?" I let a moment pass. "Whose accounts?" I said. The transfers. We needed—" "What transfers, Mom?" A pause. She was realizing in real time that she was saying things she shouldn't say on a phone call that might be recorded. "The accounts you had available. The ones— You mean the joint account that the bank restricted after you attempted an unauthorized transfer in August?" I said. "And then again 3 days ago?" Silence. "Those accounts were mine," I said, "not yours. You had access because I added you for a temporary period and I forgot to remove you. Not because you had any legal right to the funds. And the accounts you were probably hoping were mine, the ones you couldn't see anymore. Those aren't the ones you had access to. But the only account you could reach had $2,300 in it," I said. That's what the bank froze. The silence on the other end was extraordinary. I could hear my mother doing math. Then, "You set us up." I had thought about how to respond to this. I had run the conversation in my head several times over the preceding week, and I had considered several different answers, some more satisfying than others. "No," I said. "I protected myself. You made the rest of it easy." There was a sound from my mother then that I don't quite know how to describe. Not a word, not quite a sob. Something that came from lower, from the place where people keep the feelings they've been managing around. Then the rage came up over it. "Do you have any idea what you've done? We are stranded. We have no money. No, Megan can't even— Contact my attorney," I said. "Her name is Danielle Marsh. I'll text you the number." "Ava, do not come to my property," I said. "Do not contact me directly. If you need to communicate about legal matters, use the attorney." I hung up. The calls kept coming over the next 48 hours. I documented each one: time, duration, transcript of the voicemails. Danielle had advised me to let them go to voicemail when possible and to save everything. My mother cycled through the stages with impressive speed. First the yelling. Who did I think I was? What gave me the right? She was my mother and I owed her. Then the crying. Raw, genuine, the sound of someone who had arrived somewhere much worse than they'd planned for. Then the bargaining, the softest version of her voice, the one she'd used my whole childhood when she wanted something and had calculated that gentleness was the most effective route. "Just unfreeze the accounts," she said. Third day. "We'll come home and sit down and talk about this like adults, like family. Contact my attorney," I said. "Ava, please. We don't have— Do not contact me directly." I hung up. I want to be honest about something. Hanging up on my mother felt terrible. Every time. In a way way I had not fully anticipated. Not because I doubted what I was doing, but because she was my mother, and the voice asking for help was real, even if the need was entirely self-constructed. The grief and the resolve existed at the same time, and I had to hold both of them, and that was hard. I held both of them. On day 9, Danielle called me. Megan posted something, she said. Online complaint forum. She was ranting about being betrayed. She wrote something about their belongings being in storage, and she tagged the facility by accident, or didn't realize it was visible. Probably the latter. I waited. Detective Okafor's team has already coordinated with law enforcement in that county. They located a storage unit rented in your mother's name, 2 states away. A pause. Ava, your electronics are there, your furniture, most of the items on your list. I sat down. The ring? A shorter pause. The ring was not in the unit. They're following the financial trail on that. There are records of transactions that may indicate it was pawned. They have a lead. I will tell you what I felt then, which was not triumph. It was something more complicated. A heaviness that was partly grief and partly relief and partly the exhaustion of having been right about something I had desperately hoped to be wrong about. My grandmother's ring. $14,000 appraised value. 40 years on my grandmother's finger. 11 years on my dresser. Pawned. I sat with that for a while before I said anything. What happens now? I asked. The evidence package I filed includes the footage, the bank records, the email confirmation, the airport photo, the access logs, and now the storage unit discovery. Detective Okafor is coordinating with the DA's office on charges. We're looking at burglary in the 2nd degree, theft over a threshold amount, which triggers felony classification, and the bank fraud attempt. For both of them. Both. Your mother's name is on the storage unit rental. The footage shows her directing the removal. The email is in her words. Your sister's hands are in several of the camera frames. They're not going to have an easy argument here. A pause. There's one more thing. I waited. In reviewing the financial records around the fraud attempt, the destination account for the blocked transfer, our forensic accountant, James Lim, flagged something. The destination account has a pattern of transactions consistent with a larger scheme. It's not just your account that's been targeted. James Lim, CPA, CFE, certified fraud examiner, 11 years of practice, who Danielle had brought in to review the financial documentation. He had spent 3 days with the bank records. What do you mean? I said. Megan has been operating accounts in your mother's name for several months. Fraudulent credit applications, retail accounts, a few other transfers. Your mother either participated or failed to notice her name was being used for months, and those are the only 2 options. I thought about my mother, about the way she had never asked questions when Megan needed something, about the way she had arranged her life around not seeing things that would require a response. She had never asked. She never did. My mother called one last time on a Tuesday morning, 12 days after the empty house. I almost didn't pick up. Then I did. Her voice was different, stripped of the cycling. No anger, no bargaining, no calculated softness. Just a woman who had run out of registers. They might arrest us, she said. Megan made a mistake. With the accounts. The accounts in my name. I didn't know. I didn't ask. She stopped. You have to help us. You're our family. I looked around my half-empty house. The bare walls, the air mattress I'd been sleeping on for 12 days, the empty corner of my bedroom dresser where the jewelry box wasn't. You emailed me from the airport, I said, and told me to enjoy the quiet. I let that sit for exactly 1 second. So that's what I'm going to do. I heard her draw breath to respond. I hung up. Her number flashed immediately. One more call, bright and urgent on my screen, the way it had flashed my whole life when she needed something and expected me to answer. I watched it ring. 4 rings. 5. Then I blocked the number, set the phone face down on the counter, and stood in the silence of my gutted living room. It was a different silence than the one I'd come home to 12 days before. That silence had been a violation, something imposed on the space by people who thought emptiness was punishment. This one was mine. I had made it. I had chosen it, and it settled around me like something I had worked for and was finally allowed to keep. Here is what happened after. Karen Harper and Megan Harper were formally charged 5 weeks later. Karen with burglary in the 2nd degree and theft of property valued over $10,000. Both felony charges in our state. Megan with the same, plus 6 counts of identity fraud and fraudulent account creation in connection with James Lim's investigation into the secondary accounts. Karen pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for testimony against Megan regarding the financial fraud scheme. Her attorney, a public defender because the Honolulu trip had exhausted whatever liquid resources she had, negotiated 3 years of supervised probation, restitution, and community service. Megan went to trial. She was convicted on 4 of the 6 fraud counts and the theft charge. She was sentenced to 18 months, with 12 suspended pending good behavior, and 4 years of supervised probation. My grandmother's ring was recovered. A pawn shop in Maui had it. Megan had sold it on the 2nd day of the trip, which tells you everything you need to know about how confident they had both been that I would not respond the way I did. Detective Okafor called me when it was released from evidence. I drove to the police station and signed for it on a Tuesday afternoon, and the officer who handed me the bag was careful with it, the way you are careful with things that have survived something they shouldn't have had to. I held it in my hand for a long time in the parking lot before I put it on. The insurance claim was settled. The recovered items were returned. I replaced what couldn't be recovered. I bought a new sectional, different from the old one, green velvet, my own choice entirely, which I had always wanted and had talked myself out of 3 times previously for reasons I no longer remember. I see Dr. Sylvia Sylvia Cho, a licensed therapist specializing in family estrangement, on Tuesday evenings. I have been seeing her for 4 months now. We talk about the particular experience of grieving a parent who is still alive, the version of her I had spent 30 years trying to earn. The version I have finally, irrevocably accepted was never on offer. That grief is real, and I don't want to minimize it. You can know someone is dangerous and still mourn the person you wish they could have been. But here is what I also know. I know that my mother stood in the center of my living room and filmed the emptiness on her phone, proud of what she had done. I know she sent me a sun emoji. I know she believed, had always believed, that I was the kind of person who could be managed, who could be made to feel guilty, who would absorb whatever was done to her and call it family. She was not entirely wrong about the first 30 years. She was completely, catastrophically wrong about the last 3 months. And that's the thing about people who've spent a lifetime underestimating you. The fall surprises them every time, because they never thought to look at what you were actually building.